Hello YouTube, my name is Kyle and this is my intro, I guess, to my YouTube channel for video games, where I'll basically give you a brief description of myself as a gamer, what video games mean to me, and my inspirations for starting my channel, kind of like what I would like to do in the next few weeks and months with this channel. So I've been a gamer since I was about 8 years old when I first got my NES, or still the original Nintendo, from my cousin who was no longer using it. It came with 3 games, and for 3 years those were the only 3 games that I ever played. I never rented any other Nintendo games, and I didn't get any other systems until I turned 11 when I got my PlayStation 1. So it came with Super Mario 1 with the Duck Hunt, and a baseball game, and Blades of Steel, which is a hockey game. Those are the only 3 games that I played for those next 3 years. But they were awesome. You know, it was the first time I ever got to play video games. None of my friends really had them. Video games hadn't really boomed in the late 80s, early 90s. It was only until like late 90s where they were starting to become, you know, a big thing. And then in the 2000s, where it seems as though everyone has at least played a video game, and most chances are do own a system, especially if you're my age. So I remember, you know, waking up at like 7 a.m. in the morning to play like an hour of Super Mario, pausing it, and then coming back home like 8 hours later and playing the game where I was. And it was such a neat thing to, you know, just play a game with my brother, who's 4 years younger than me, so he would have been 4 at the time. And we were very close, and video games have actually kept us close over the years, because when I first left to college, I bought my brother an Xbox for his birthday just before I left, because his birthday's in July. So I had an Xbox and I wanted him to have an Xbox so that we could both play Halo 2, which was coming out later that year, and then talk to each other on Xbox Live while we played the game. And we've always been doing that. You know, we'll play like a Halo game or a StarCraft 2 or World of Warcraft. We'll play the game and we'll also socialize at the same time. It was just a cool way of keeping in touch and not having to pay anything for like a phone bill or something like that. And it's been like that since the beginning, where we would always try to play like co-op games where we could play 2 players, or what we would do is one of us would play a game for an hour, then the other guy would have his turn to play for an hour, but we would always be watching each other and seeing what we're doing. So it would just be like, you know, on a Saturday it would be like from whenever we woke up until supper time, where one of us would just be playing one game. We would all obviously go and do other things at the time, but sometimes we would just sit there for like a good 8 hours. You know, one guy was playing, then the other guy, and we would watch and talk about video games and what was going on in the video game and the storyline that was taking place at the time. So I also remember a time when we got our first PC and we got a game called Hunter Hunted. And it was the first game that we could play co-op, because on the Nintendo, the 3 games that we had, I don't think you could play co-op on the baseball or sports game. But what Hunter Hunter is it's kind of like a 2D game where you're either a human who has guns and you can fire things, or you are a monster that throw knives and swords and things like that. But in this game you could play 2 players and you could go through the levels together, and we were just amazed by that, because being able to play together side by side is basically what we've always wanted to do. I still remember then later on, a few years later, picking up a game for the N64, Perfect Dark, where it was an FPS game and you could play together against bots, and we thought that was just amazing. You know, that just blew our minds to be able to play an FPS game together. And then eventually when the Xbox Live came out and Halo came out, we just became huge fans, because we love working together in StarCraft 2 and World of Warcraft. Any game like an FPS, Left 4 Dead, that's what we've been playing a lot lately. It's just always meant a lot to us to be able to work together, to strategize together, and have each other's back. And we have played the hell out of Halo 2. So, you know, video games have meant a lot for me over the years, and my brother, and we would get, you know, every time we would get a new system, it would be an awesome thing. I remember when we first got our Game Boy Colors, it was our first handhelds, and we got Pokemon for them, and we just, like, as soon as we bought them, we just came home and just played them, and we were like, did your guy evolve yet? It was just like such a big thing back then. and it just has a lot of good memories for me. So video games will always mean a lot, and that's kind of why I wanted to start this channel. I've always kind of wanted to do reviews or just talk about general gaming. And what kind of pushed me was I found another YouTube account called Pete Dorr. So that's the guy's name, and that's his YouTube account. I'll put a link actually. And basically what he did is a few years ago he started doing reviews and then a series that he calls Games I Bought Recently. So he just talks about games that he picked up and his impressions of those for however long he's played them, a few hours here, a few hours there, if he hasn't played them or not. And that seems to have really caught on YouTube, where you can type in Games I Bought Recently and you get a list of people, but it seems as though Pete Dorr is the first guy who started that. And I only found his account like a few months ago, and when I did, I was watching as many videos as I could. I started from the bottom and I just went to the top, and then after like a week I was done seeing all his videos, so I had to wait for each video for like a week. He only makes like a video a week, which is perfectly fine, but when you're used to watching, you know, like 10-15 videos a day, it's really weird. It's like you go into a Pete Dorr withdrawal. But if you know who I'm talking about, or if you check him out, you'll see what I mean. So I would say that he's probably my inspiration for starting this. And another thing too that I've done over the past 2 years is that I've noticed that I'm a kind of guy who would only play games for a little bit if I wasn't really interested in them. And I wouldn't beat a lot of games. I would play a lot of multiplayer games. And I still do play a lot of multiplayer games, but what I want to do is kind of branch myself out and play single player games and actually beat them. Go to the end, because a lot of games at the beginning aren't as interesting and they don't really show you what the game can be later on in the levels. A game can completely change if you play after the first few hours. So that's what I've kind of been doing over the past 2 years. And another thing too is that, and I wish I wouldn't have, but every time that a new system would come out or a new game, I would trade in my old games or my old systems to get the new game or new system. So I have never had a big collection of games, and I still don't now. I only own like maybe 100, 120 games in my library. This is a good portion of it right here. I do have way at least that doubled over there. But yeah, it's just such a bad thing that I used to trade in my games, because I want to relive all the games that I used to play. And that's kind of my goal right now, is to beat as many games as I can, to really enjoy the single players that they offer, and also start my old collection that I used to have and continue on creating my collection. So that's what I'm kind of going to want to do with this channel, is to talk about games that I used to play, as well as kind of like games I bought recently. But what I'm going to do is also talk about, it'll be called my gaming update, and it'll just be like a brief video about the games that I have been playing, that I have picked up recently, as well as games that I used to have either for a few months or a few years even, but I decided to pick up either to beat or just I had an itch to play them again. So that's one of the things that I do plan on doing, as well as continue my unboxing videos, and then every once in a while talking about big gaming events. So like E3, I'll probably do reviews for that, for what I think of the games that are coming out, BlizzCon, and possibly even some StarCraft 2 or any games that I'm really embedded into. So like StarCraft 2 I play a lot of, World of Warcraft I play here and there, and any FPS game that I seem to be playing a lot, I might talk about that. So look forward to those. I'll also be doing video game reviews, but I probably won't be doing a lot of them, and I was originally going to do one for Brink. I still plan on doing it at some point before the summer's over, but I only had a TV that was about like this big, and it was one of the old school ones, so it wouldn't have worked well, because I can't actually play the actual in-game, so I'm gonna have to actually record it from my camera to the TV, but I had to get a bigger one or a better one than the old school one, so I decided to pick out a 40-inch Samsung. So I'm thinking that that'll work. fairly well for what I want to accomplish with it. So that's what I'm going to be doing for reviews. I'll just talk about the game and kind of show some in-game mechanics. So Brink I'm going to do one for, and LA Noire, but don't be expecting those in the next week, maybe even the next month. If I get one of them out in June, I'll be happy with that. So definitely look forward to those, and if anything else sounds interesting and you kind of like what I'm talking about, subscribe, and I'll talk to you later. Goodbye, YouTube.